fun you can have with your clothes on. Are we ready?
Yes, Mommy!
Then let's do this. Trivia, Sandbar, 7 o'clock, Wednesday. See you there.
We need to talk.
Okay.
We've noticed you've been going to KFC a lot more than usual lately.
And
that's fine. We know you love it.
We just don't understand how you could afford it.
The KFC What a Deal menu starting at just $3. Gives you lots of great choices and value. Available at KFC Baytown Plaza, Shedden Road, and in the Strand. The KFC What a Deal value meals. The deal everyone should know about. Come to KFC and enjoy a variety of tasty choices at surprising prices. KFC, so good.
Visit Healthcare Pharmacy's second location in Governor Square, servicing West Bay and the 7 Mile Beach Corridor with a care and professionalism you have come to expect from Healthcare Pharmacy. Healthcare Pharmacy in Governor Square also stocks a huge selection of Hallmark and shoebox greeting cards, vitamins, sunblock, last minute, and everyday needs. To refill and transfer your prescriptions, simply WhatsApp 329-7313 or visit healthcarepharmacy.ky or drop by Monday to Saturday from 9 till 6.
When it comes to weekly meal prep, I trust Kirk Market to provide the best value for quality proteins. The butchers at Kirk Market are super helpful. They always slice my steaks perfectly. Kirk Market has everything I need for healthy and flavorful protein-packed meals. From lean cuts of CAB choice beef, tender CAB prime beef, the juiciest pork, and all-natural hormone-free poultry, to their seafood section with everything from fresh local snapper to omega-3 rich salmon. I choose Kirk Market for the highest quality proteins to support my healthy lifestyle. Kirk Market. Eat well, live well, and discover a world of choice.
K-Man, Units is here, the island's newest move-in and storage solution. Our robot delivery system allows you to put your unit almost anywhere while providing level loading, uploading, and minimizing shifting. What's even better, no time constraints. Pack at your own pace for moving or store as long as you need. Short-term or long-term, at the home or on the job site. Units, fast, safe, and secure. Check us out at units.ky and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Enter to win Ashley's monthly $1,000 giveaway with any purchase now through December 2024. A winner every month. Don't miss out on Ashley Cash. Visit Ashley Furniture Home Store on 360 Dorsey Drive. This is home.
Buy and sell practically everything online. EKTrade.com is K-Man's online marketplace for goods, services, real estate, cars, and jobs. Go to where K-Man searches. Go to EKTrade.com.
The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And good evening, K-Man. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon, and welcome to Straight Talk.
We are being broadcast to you live on your radio dial on Bobo 103.1 FM and simulcast live on YouTube and Instagram. The phone lines are open at 745-2626. Or you can send us a quick WhatsApp message, either in the form of an audio note or a WhatsApp traditional text message by dialing 928-2562. Ellio, I trust you had a enjoyable, what is today, Tuesday?
I had a rather relaxing day, to be quite honest with you.
Well, that's very good.
You know, still a lot of things to do, but, you know, compared to the normal hectic day, today was pretty good.
Excellent, excellent. And I understand obviously I understand from our own promos. Why don't you tell the audience what our primary topic will be today?
Well, I don't know if you want to get past some of your good news first, but I was hoping that we would be able to continue the discussion that we started yesterday.
Sure.
In terms of all of the stand-up scooters, the now motorized bicycles, and other things that are impacting the traffic.
All right. Well, we will definitely get to that. But yes, thank you for reminding us. We do try to start off with some positive, good news.
We said it's getting harder to find.
It's getting harder to find. In some cases, you have to roll them over to the next day. For example, yesterday, these were some of the good news items in yesterday's media. But, of course, we started off with a bang of great news with our guest, Pamela Small.
This is true.
Of Girl Power. And, again, want to thank Pamela for joining us. What a fantastic conversation yesterday was, learning about both the organization of Girl Power and, of course, everything you wanted to know about beauty pageants, but were afraid to ask with Miss World Cayman, Miss Supranational. Yeah. See, I said it without pausing.
You did it.
And Miss Teen World Cayman as well. So, again, kudos to Pamela and her team for all that she does on a number of fronts, but all of them seeking to have a common denominator, and that's empowering women, yeah?
Empowering women, but, I also walked away feeling like there's more that we can do as a community, both in terms of finances, chipping in that way, as well as here is something, this is something to me that's lacking, and it's really no reason to be lacking, and that is the public support.
Right.
And applause, just getting up, complimenting persons. We don't seem to be that great at it.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give an example, even though I'm dying to give one. But there's so many instances.
There are. I think, I've thought about that very fact oftentimes. I think we, as Caymanians, seem to begrudge success, particularly in each other. It's much more comfortable and easy to tear people down, and we do that with such fervor and excitement. But when it comes time to, praise individual accomplishments of our own people, be it male or female, be it sports or professional, we seem
very difficult.
Unwilling to do it.
Yeah, I don't know why, but we definitely have a bit of that crab mentality. And one thing I will share with the listening audience is bear this in mind. No one can tear you down unless they're feeling below you. Okay, so if there's a compliment in it, they're obviously feeling below you.
Obviously.
You can't possibly tear something down if you're above it.
Quite
okay?
Right.
Now, you do have a couple of persons that one could argue are above you, and then they'll like to stand on you.
Yeah.
And those are probably the professional crabs.
Yes.
But, bear that in mind. If people are tearing you down, it's because psychologically they have to be feeling less than you.
Indeed. And speaking of girl power and, what we learned yesterday, whilst to your point that we seem to, as a people, begrudgingly, hand out kudos to our own, what is something else that we also don't do enough of, but I'm grateful that there are organizations like Girl Power and, of course, the 3 pageants in which she's, responsible for, and that is pay it forward. Reaching down and helping the next person, the next generation rise and be the best that they can be, and therefore go on, whether it be through your assistance or otherwise, but certainly you didn't sit on the mountaintop alone. You also didn't get there by yourself. Somebody helped you. And those persons who have reached that mountaintop, again, thinking of Ms. Pamela Small and her organizations, every day they reach backwards and try to pull up, the next female leader. I think that's fantastic.
It is fantastic, and I want to compliment her for that approach. Again, here is a person who enters into a particular industry. She knows the skills and stuff that she was lacking.
Yes.
And then you're getting an opportunity to see firsthand, hey, I thought maybe I was the only one, but it's missing here too.
Sure.
And rather than just complain about that, here is what I can do to actually make a difference.
Yeah.
I remember a similar situation, for example, when I was building, my apartments. I remember the challenges, and it was one of the things that aided me in terms of coming up with the pension amendment. How can I make it easier for the next Caymanian to be able to own their own property or to build a house, or in this particular case, build apartments. So we really need to do that. And again, that is definitely what I believe your and I aim is on this program. It is about not tearing people down, because it's very easy to come on this program and just talk about who didn't wear a dress last night and whatever, the typical crab mentality. But we want to be able to educate, enlighten, and to elevate each other. I'm pretty sure we can get some calls that we'll get educated, enlightened, and elevated as well.
Sure.
But it's about looking and saying what's good for Cayman, what's good for Caymanians, and seeing if we can find some of those solutions together.
Absolutely, I fully agree. Well, on to the good news, more good news.
More good news.
When we talk about what's good for Cayman and Caymanians, there was a headline that appeared in the Compass which says, Caymanians make impact at UK Youth Parliament and the UCOTA Youth Summit. Just a few quick paragraphs. 16-year-old Caymanian Jack Hurlston added his name to the list of illustrious persons such as Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, and Tony Blair, who have all made speeches in the famous, if not infamous, House of Commons in the British Parliament. Hurlston was taking part in last week's UK Youth Parliament, where more than 260 students crowded into the House of Commons green benches to take part in debates on a variety of subjects, from climate change to creating more opportunities for young people. Showing no sign of being intimidated by his historic surroundings, Hurlston spoke with confidence on the importance of accommodating neurodiverse students in the education system. Neurodiverse, that's a new word for me. I would have to look that one up.
Is that Euro you're saying?
Neuro, N-E-U-R-O, diverse.
Oh.
I'm going to look that up. I don't know what that means. Students in the education system, as well as his own experience of moving to the UK to study for his GSCEs due on his own learning needs. The Cayman Islands delegates included Jack Hurlston, Thea Shea Foster, and Brittany Evans. So I want to say kudos and congratulations to all of them. And let me copy and paste what this word means, because now I'm curious. I really am.
Tell me, hold on. You're gonna have to. Let me see if I can.
We're gonna look at it together. All right.
Search that up right now. Let's search it up right now.
Neurodiverse. Paste. Neurodiverse, displaying a characteristic by autistic or other neurologically atypical patterns of thought or behavior, not neurotypical. So obviously, autistic persons with I don't know if an autistic is a learning disability. It's a different type of learning, but I don't know if it's categorized in the same learning disability bracket. Again, something to look into, or something for the listening audience to educate us on. But that's what neurodiverse means. So I guess when they speak of what they say was due to his own learning needs, he must have specific learning needs that might fit into this demographic. And believing that obviously we need to
one of those
add to the curriculum to include persons in this bracket as well, which again, last time I checked, the schoolhouse was there for all students. So certainly
should be.
If we have to, make specific carve-outs, then we just have to make specific carve-outs.
Sounds like another sort of, special needs kind of thing.
I think you might be right. Well, in any event, special needs or not, Jack ended up in the House of Commons speaking on behalf of the Cayman Islands from the bench of, again, the likes of Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, and several other persons, that have spoken from there, including Keir Starmer and much of the, UK political establishment. So I think that's fantastic. I want to congratulate not only the students themselves, for their wonderful achievement, because certainly they'll remember this the rest of their lives. But also the Youth Parliament program, which, as you are aware, is certainly offered through the Houses of Parliament, the House of Parliament here in the Cayman Islands. MPs are involved in that, as is the parliamentary staff themselves. I'm privileged to say that my son was a youth parliamentarian, which is interesting, because when my son was getting ready to graduate high school, he was so looking forward to going to university, and through various conversations with him, I kind of got the feeling that he wanted to go to university so that he can sprout his wings and then fly off to Europe and settle, nest there. He wasn't coming back, was the initial conversations I had with him. But then he took part in youth parliament. He didn't want anything to do with politics either. He had a father who was involved in it, first in radio.
Staying away from that.
Yeah, first in radio and then as an actual MP itself, and he hated that part of my life. In other words, he would never go shopping with me, because he knew I would stop and talk to people, and it was not part of his patience. But
taking up his dad's time.
But then he did. But again, he went through the youth parliament system, and not only did he gain an appreciation for Cayman's political system, the issues that Dad and others debate and argue about, whether on the radio or elsewhere, but it also, I think, instilled a sense of national pride in him, so much so that he now started talking about, well, when I come back, when I come back, when I come back. And that type of conversation wasn't there before. So, again, I attribute that
to
one
was an excitement about coming back, and two, probably getting a bit of excitement about the politics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
game changer.
It was a game changer. And, again, he had the opportunity, I don't think, not to go off to the UK as a representative, but he was in Turks and Caicos and as a representative of Youth Parliament and Cayman, and he certainly enjoyed that. A young 15-year-old getting the red carpet treatment of ministers and MPs.
Absolutely.
Certainly an ego boost.
I take this as another opportunity to talk about and highlight what I was talking about with Miss Pamela yesterday, when we expose children, and not just children, everyone really, but specifically children, when we can expose them to these different things, their minds start changing, and a lot of those attitudes and thoughts and ideas are changing.
That's right.
Like I said, take the kids to the fire station. I want to be a fireman.
Yes.
Take the same kids police station. I want to be a policeman.
Correct.
Well, speaking about that, I'd like to share a parliamentary experience that I had with the youth parliament. I'll never forget, I got in there and one of the young men were saying, oh, I don't believe in parties. Parties are bad. You know, we should have purely independence. So, okay, really? And I asked him, I said, okay, share with us what idea you would like to implement. Yeah. And so he shared it. And I said, well, okay, so you want to bring a motion. And I said, okay, so you have to find someone in this room to support it.
Yes.
Then he looked around and no one was supporting, and you could feel the clock ticking. You know, it's like, is someone going to support this?
Yes.
And finally, some kid, almost as if to say, okay, just so we can move on.
I feel guilty.
Yeah.
I help you out a little bit.
Puts his hand up and says, you know, I'll support it.
Right.
And I said, okay, now you've brought a motion and you have a seconder. Now you can actually move in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And a couple minutes later after that, I said, so let me just ask you something. If he wanted to bring something, would you support it? He said, yeah, I think I would. And I said, why? He said, because he supported mine. I said, see, you haven't been in Parliament more than 20 minutes and you already have one party member.
Good point. Very good point. Excellent example.
So a lot of times when we're exposed to those things, and we can get some of that exposure if we really sit and think about it, but definitely nothing beats the kind of hands-on, the neurological connections that make you now start to change a lot of thoughts and ideas that you once had.
No, absolutely. And that's why I want to continue to encourage institutions. I know high schools do it. I know universities do it. But this is really a responsibility, if not an obligation, of companies that have the services to partner with educational institutions, to give young people not only exposure at, say, career days, but when they've said, okay, you know, I'm business-minded, I want to try banking, or, you know, again, I feel a calling for the uniform branch of service, Coast Guard, police, etc., then, you know, organizations that have these real jobs and perform these real tasks need to create an opening for those internships. So to your point, they can experience it firsthand. They may find something that they think they like, but after trying it, they go, this is not a good fit. Yeah. Or the transverse may also be true. They love it and then throw themselves into it completely, immersing themselves in all the learning so that when they're ready, they can apply for the job and get it with enthusiasm. And that's what we want to build. So in the same line of obligating companies to do a better job of training, but the first step is exposure. Expose them
I wonder
to it.
how much of that actually goes on now. I mean, I remember being in school and, you know, going on the summer vacation. I actually ended up working at Roy West Trust, right? I said, okay, vacation, so I ended up working at Roy West Trust, which used to be upstairs Royal Bank in town. And for the newcomers, Royal Bank used to be at that time where Victoria's Secrets is.
That's right.
And upstairs used to have the trust company, Roy West Trust. Yeah. So I worked there for a couple of weeks, and then they actually called me back when I was getting out of school. So, hey, I got a job.
Right.
I guess I must have did something pretty decent. But I'm wondering, is that, I hope that sort of thing is still going on.
Well, I know certainly at CCC it is still going on where my son graduated high school from. I know that's still happening there. I think, you know, some of the other schools may adopt it. But to be honest with you, I can't say to your point, whereas it was commonplace across the spectrum, both in public school and private school when we were in school. I'm hoping it is still commonplace today.
Sure, hope so.
But again, if certain members of the public, whether you're, you know, with the education department or you're just a parent,
a mom and dad,
you know, please enlighten us, because as we oftentimes say, we don't always have the answers, but we know where to go get them. And in this case, the single greatest resource to this program is you, the listening audience. The other bit of good news, and you and I kind of touched on it during the break, but I don't believe we actually mentioned it on the air. And if we did mention it on the air, then please stop me before I get started. But we were looking at another headline that said all women inducted into the Scuba Diving Hall of Fame.
I remember
did I say that on the air, or did I just say that to you?
Yeah, I think you might have just said it to me.
Right, I thought so as well.
Either way, a repeat's not going to kill
Let's
anyone.
repeat it. Again, just a few short paragraphs. For the first time, all the inductees into the International Scuba Diving Hall of Fame this year, in 2025, are women. This year's list of inductees was announced by the Cayman Islands-based Hall of Fame Board of Directors and the Cayman Ministry and Department of Tourism on Saturday, the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. Established by the Cayman Islands Ministry of Tourism in 2000, the Hall of Fame celebrates dive industry leaders who have contributed to the success of recreational scuba diving worldwide through innovation, advancements made in areas of dive tourism, equipment design, dive safety, inclusivity, exploration, adventure, innovation, and more. Now, this year's inductees don't include any Caymanian names, but they do include people like Simone Cousteau, into the Women's Divers Hall of Fame as an early pioneer, Michelle Cove from the Bahamas, Anna Hansen from the U.S., Rosemary Lunn from the U.K., but past notable Caymanians into the Scuba Diving Hall of Fame have included persons like Kathy Church in 2008. Certainly persons will remember Kathy Church and her underwater photography, which largely was the innovator, if not the leader in photography in the early 70s and on. Certainly there are other persons that have followed suit, like I think of Darwin Ebanks, who oftentimes plays that pirate every year at Pirates Week. I forget the name.
He is iconic.
Captain Jack Black or something. I don't know what it is. I'm not, I don't know what the name was, but he's certainly very iconic as a pirate. But he was one of the early Caymanian dive instructors, dive masters. For a while, he taught people how to dive, but then he got into underwater photography around about the same time that I learned how to dive. And I remember seeing his photos in galleries and places like wherever Kathy Church was featured. There was Darwin there as well, and he had some tremendous works of art. I hope one day, if he's not there already, he certainly will find his way into the Scuba Diving Hall of Fame, because I think he deserves it. But we want to recognize the Scuba Diving Hall of Fame because it is all women. So we have history in the making this time. Not just so happens to coincide with International Women's Day, but all women were featured for the first time in history in that particular Hall of Fame, which, again, is a Cayman product, if you will.
Another congratulations is required.
Another congratulations is required. And lastly, it's not good news, but, well, it's good news to a sense, but it's not great news. Referring to the U.S. measles outbreak that's going on in the U.S., and in particular, we discovered last week it has now reached Miami, which is a popular destination for Caymanians, particularly on long Easter weekends and whatnot. So whilst the measles outbreak is not a positive news, what is positive is a statement that was issued on Friday by the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Nick Gent, that suggested that in identification of a case of measles in Florida in particular, they have heightened their own vaccination protocols here in Cayman. So Cayman's Public Health Department announced it will be holding a special clinic for measles, mumps, and rubella, or MMR, vaccinations. They are available to persons in Cayman. They had a special event last week, but I think persons can just attend the Adult and International Vaccination Clinic. Also at the HSA, you have to call and schedule an appointment, but certainly if you do plan to travel to the U.S., Florida, or elsewhere, and if you haven't had a MMR or measles vaccination before, you might want to get one, because certainly it seems to be making its rounds, and you don't want to get it, number one. Number two, you don't want to get it and bring it back home and then start us down that COVID road again. Whilst perhaps not as serious and as to be classified as a pandemic, certainly it is an illness that, I don't think anybody wants to get.
Well, I'm sure they all start slowly.
I'm sure they will. So I just want to congratulate the HSA. Obviously, keeping a close watch on the headlines and the horizon and what's going on, not just here in Cayman, but everywhere else. And this is going to be important to us because with Donald Trump out there, shutting down agencies like the CDC, firing staff. I understand, there are firings expected at NOAA, which of course we use to get hurricane forecasts that are coming off the coast of Africa, or perhaps even more concerning, those rapid intensification movements coming out of Central America. If those terminations reach, significant proportions, we might have to get our information from somewhere else. God help us, from the National Weather Service. And again, they do a great job, but with the help of other people. Well, I just laugh because we have a Doppler radar station that exists at the airport, but the other day it was down because they were working on the AC unit. It seems like the Doppler radar is down more than it's up. You know, but
what is it,
again,
connected to the AC unit? Or
I see, that was my question.
Right.
What does the AC in the building have to do with the Doppler radar? But I suppose any excuse will do when you say, sorry, it's not working today.
I'll tell you where my mind goes when I hear that. When I was in college, right?
Yeah.
So my brother Jeff and I are in there. We found this old TV. You know, it's one of those TV. It had some waves going through it. You know, the static. You know, sometimes you got to bang it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that every now and then you would stand up, and the reception would be perfect, and one of us would shout, "Don't move." It's perfect just where you are. Don't move.
Don't move. Stay right there.
You know,
hold it. Just there.
Sometimes it could be a hand in the air. Maybe you raise the foot, the cross, anything. Don't move. It's perfect now.
That's right.
God, it was so funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what came to my mind when you talked about the AC. somehow the AC is affecting the Doppler radar. That's funny.
Taking us back to the old rabbit ears days when we used to get TV from antennas that we would adjust on the back of the television. Again, something the Generation Zers have no idea what we're talking about. What? Rabbit ears? What are you talking about?
Yeah, what is rabbit ears?
You know, exactly.
What's an antenna?
What's an antenna? 4:56 is the time in studios, giving us just over 2 minutes before we have to pause and take a short commercial break. But again, if you want to join in the congratulations, whether it be for Jack Hurlston, Bethany, let me get the names right, Jack Hurlston, Bethany Evans, or Thea Shea Foster, the Cayman representatives to the UK Parliament, UK Youth Parliament. Now's a good chance to do so. Or, of course, just send out kudos and congratulations to the women who have recently been inducted to the Scuba Diving Hall of Fame. Or to throw some roses on the HSA for staying abreast of, again, contagious diseases and illnesses and trying to keep our borders safe. Certainly, again, COVID provided them lots of practice.
Lots of experience.
But clearly they haven't forgotten. And it's good to know that the gatekeepers, particularly in terms of health, are paying attention to what's going on the other side of the horizon, so to speak, and keeping us safe. So that's all very positive news.
Or you might call just to completely change the subject.
Or you might call to completely change the subject entirely. But any event, when we come back from the next break, we will be engaging our primary topic, which, again, we'll be taking a look at the motorcycles, scooters, and the whole question of road safety. As we began yesterday, my colleague will be taking the lead on that conversation, and I hope to be following along, offering, support wherever I can. I did try reaching out to the Department of Vehicle and Licensing today to sort of get some direction from them because, as I told you yesterday,
so you have something to share?
So I'd have something to share because I remember looking up on the website yesterday when we started talking about it, and the things like scooters and the things like motorcycles, electric motorcycles, weren't necessarily mentioned, immediately. Didn't jump out off the page at you, though I did discover that we could find a registration, particularly the fees, for registration of motorcycles and mopeds, but certainly not the terminology in terms of what are the requirements in this category. And I did reach out to the DVDL with the view of saying, listen, what's the law that governs you? Which one is it? Because there are a number. Didn't get a response. Then it sort of, a light bulb went off and said, how about the traffic law? So I did look at the traffic law. Now, there are over 111 different sections in the traffic law, so I have some information to share, but when we come back, it'll be all you highlighting this issue.
Don't make it all me.
And we will be engaging the public on your thoughts. So keep it locked. The phone lines are open, 745-2626. There'll be more straight talk still to come right here on 103.1 FM.
BBC News. BBC News. World news from the BBC. Violent clashes. Thick black smoke.
A tremendous legal victory.
Crucial elections.
Destructive winds.
A search and recovery operation.
A race against time.
An imminent threat. Flying a drone over a rival team's training session.
Whatever is happening, wherever it's happening, catch up with the latest news bulletins from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. Bobo FM. We're making Bobo FM bigger and better. We've got a brand new frequency with even more power. Retune your FM radio to 103.1 103.1 now. This is Bobo FM, the home of the BBC World Service, the most trusted news source in the world. Now in our new home of 103.1 FM. This is Bobo 103.1.
The BBC's From Our Own Correspondent.
In today's Russia, no one is allowed anywhere near the political stage if they pose a serious challenge to Vladimir Putin.
Stories and reflections from our reporters around the world.
There is a major sense of insecurity here.
More people are coming in from Sudan every day.
From Our Own Correspondent from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
For business, they say location, location, location. But really, there's no better location than right here, right now on your mobile phone or laptop. Buy and sell your pre-owned gear where the island is searching online. Buy and sell on ektrade.com. That's ektrade.com.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. Powered by Health Services Authority, the home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Ukraine says an American proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire in the war with Russia includes a truce in the air, at sea and along the entire front line, as US officials prepare to present the deal to Moscow. After 8 hours of talks in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine backed the proposal, with President Zelensky describing it as a positive step. Nomia Iqbal is in Washington.
The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, announced the ceasefire deal, saying the shooting had to stop. He didn't give details on any American security guarantees for Ukraine, but said gaining access to Ukraine's rare minerals wasn't part of the agreement. He also made clear the pressure was now on Russia to accept the ceasefire. His team plans to take the offer to President Putin this week. The negotiations also yielded a resumption in US military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, which was suspended after President Trump's public fallout with President Zelensky.
Donald Trump has dropped his threat to dramatically step up the trade war with Canada by doubling the tariff on imports of its steel and aluminium. The White House said the 50% duty would not now take effect on Wednesday. Mr. Trump changed course after the Canadian province of Ontario decided to suspend the imposition of a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States. He told reporters outside the White House that he respected the decision by Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford.
The right thing to do is what we're doing. We're going to get our jobs back, and we're not going to be left at. Now, I will say this, that, as you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called, and he said he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that.
Donald Trump has blamed his predecessor for the turmoil on US stock markets in recent days. The main indices on Wall Street all closed down on Tuesday after another turbulent day. A plane carrying the former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte is heading to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, where he'll face trial. Prosecutors allege that during his time in office, Mr. Duterte had thousands of drug dealers and users killed without trial. Here's Jonathan Head.
The Philippines government said it had received a warrant for his arrest from the International Criminal Court and was acting on it in order to meet its legal obligations. Mr. Duterte and his family contested his detention, but were unable to prevent his extradition. Human rights campaigners and families of the thousands killed in his violent drug war have applauded his arrest. But that was only made possible by the collapse of the alliance between the Duterte family and that of current President Bongbong Marcos, who until recently had said he would not cooperate with the ICC.
Jonathan Head with that report. World News from the BBC. The Portuguese government has collapsed, having lost a confidence vote in Parliament. The motion was tabled by the government itself. Alison Roberts has the details.
Prime Minister Luis Montenegro's right-of-centre coalition lacks the majority in Parliament, yet his government resolved to table a motion of confidence after the main opposition socialists announced a plan to set up a committee of inquiry into the business dealings of Mr. Montenegro's family company. He has denied any wrongdoing but failed to answer some questions raised by the media and opposition and has now effectively opted to appeal to the voters instead. Portugal's president is not obliged to dissolve Parliament but had already indicated that he would do so, calling a snap election for mid-May.
Romania's constitutional court has upheld a decision by the electoral authorities to ban the far-right candidate Călin Georgescu from contesting a rescheduled presidential poll in May. Mr Georgescu won the first round of the election last year, but the process was annulled amid allegations that he'd benefited from Russian interference. Mr Georgescu condemned the latest ruling, saying democracy and freedom seem to be taking their last breath. The Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif says the security forces are fighting insurgents who stormed a passenger train and took hostages. The Jaffa Express was carrying more than 400 people when it was attacked in Baluchistan province. A banned separatist group, the Baluch Liberation Army, has claimed responsibility. A junior minister said the rebels had taken several hostages to a mountainous area but didn't specify a number. Israel and Lebanon have agreed to hold talks to demarcate their border. A US envoy, Morgan Ortagus, wrote on X that Washington was bringing the two sides together to discuss a diplomatic resolution of outstanding issues. The statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office said Benjamin Netanyahu had agreed with Washington and Paris to establish working groups to discuss demarcation. BBC News.
Views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, K-Man. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon, and welcome back here to Straight Talk, right here on 103.1. Number to call here in the studio is 745-2626. That's 745-2626 if you want to get into the conversation or even attempt to change it.
That's right. You can also reach out to us via WhatsApp by dialing 928-2562. And there you can send us either a WhatsApp voice note or the traditional WhatsApp text message. But moving away from our relative good news conversation onto the primary topic of the day, where we pick up from yesterday, where we, I guess, engage a conversation on the whole notion of these motorcycles, scooters, electric-powered bicycles that we see traversing the roadways, whether by surprise or you actually see them coming. You know, as you pointed out, we started this conversation at the tail end at 6 o'clock yesterday, so we thought maybe we'd bring it up earlier in the event that folks had either, for some miracle, already gotten out of their car from traffic and were already indoors. But today we're going to make sure at, 7 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, they're definitely in their car or they're still stuck at the office.
Definitely.
But if they are at the office, hopefully they're picking us up on YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah, I don't know how long we were able to chat about it yesterday, but I know it was for a very short period of time. And basically, it was just a few mornings ago. I have seen these things before, but just the other morning, I was on that road cutting across from Linford Pearson Highway that then leads over towards the Jose's. And putting on my indicator to do the normal sort of turn that you would go into Jose's, I observed that there was right away someone zipping across on one of these bicycles that are now sort of almost like a motorbike. I don't know what the proper name for that is. Right. And first of all, you know, as a person who's driving a car, you're tending to look for oncoming traffic. You're sitting and saying, you know, first of all, I'm in traffic. I'm not expecting someone to necessarily overtake me in another car.
On a bicycle, no less.
And the thing of it is that I thought to myself, I mean, had I not been a little bit more careful, it's very easy to have ended up knocking that person down. And basically understand that knocking you down, I mean, let me give a very weird scenario. If anybody's ever got up at the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't know, a restroom call, I have no idea, and you buck your toe, you know how painful that is?
Yeah.
Okay, so I looked up very quickly last night. Someone riding one of these little bicycles or the scooters, whatever the proper name is, going at about 20 to 25 miles an hour. You're getting a massive blow if you hit, let's say, a wall.
Right.
You do the calculations, I think the math comes out to be pretty much you're hitting something looking like it's 7,000 and something pounds being dropped on you.
Right.
And it comes out to be something like 50-something pounds per square inch on your body. And basically, let's put it this way, that's very injurious to the human being. Now, obviously, it depends on how you hit, how you're actually hitting that particular thing that's going to determine the damage. But suffice it to say, it is not a good thing.
Right.
And let me put the caveat on by saying I understand that there's a lot of persons that, you know, they might utilize this because it's a nice, very affordable, let's put it that way, means of transportation, an opportunity to cut the traffic a little bit quicker. And some persons might be doing it in addition to, or even just solely for environmental reasons. So there's a lot of benefit, and I'm not trying to knock that.
Yeah.
But I'm concerned about the potential danger of this. And as far as I can see, it doesn't appear as if we have too many rules and regulations that deals with this. Yesterday, I mentioned that when I was younger, we used to even have a license for our bicycles.
Yes.
You know, there was a little license plate there. You had to register it. And all of these things play an important role. So if I look at a vehicle parked on the road that has a license plate allows the authorities to be able to say, oh, this vehicle's been parked here for 3 days. Who's the owner?
Yeah.
And you might come to discover that the person is missing in action. Who knows?
Right.
But you'll see a lot of these things. First of all, they don't have those licenses. As far as I know, they're not paying a license for it. And then anyone can pretty much jump. For example, what's the proper name for the little scooter one? The little.
That's a very good question. I couldn't find a proper name.
I'm thinking stand-up scooter.
Surely not in the traffic law.
Okay. So again, my colleague even did the search. You're not even finding these things in the law. So if somebody knows about it, then highlight it. But anyone basically that can be parked on the side of the road, technically anyone can get onto those and they just drive off. And I've seen them passing me at very good speeds. And majority of these persons are not wearing helmets. They're zooming across you.
Yeah, stand-up electric scooters.
Stand-up electric scooters.
That's how they're defined by Google. Stand-up electric scooters for adults have become a flexible alternative to traditional transportation methods. These scooters offer a convenient and eco-friendly way to navigate urban environments.
Right.
So that's it.
And I'm pretty sure it has to have a place. But bear in mind that especially the middle of the road, I don't necessarily think that's the case. Because if anything, you would expect that it would be on that left side of you, you know, where we would consider to be a bicycle lane. And of course, based on a lot of information you get, you will be told that motorbikes are not supposed to necessarily be there either. But so I looked up very quickly, like accidents and injury statistics. And here are some of the things that you find. Germany in 2022, there were 8,260 e-scooter accidents resulting in personal injury, with 1,234 individuals sustaining serious injuries and 11 fatalities. Notably, over 80% of those injured were riders themselves. In the United States, a study reported 20 injuries per 100,000 e-scooter trips over a 3-month period, with nearly half being head injuries, 15% of which were traumatic. Between early 2018 and mid-2019, at least 11 fatalities were associated with e-scooter use. And in Queensland, Australia, in 2024, there were nearly 300 e-scooter crashes, resulting in 8 deaths and numerous serious injuries. And I recall, if my memory serves me right, we've had at least 2 major accidents relating to these things. There were one where a lady, I think, was somewhere up around, I don't want to call it the name of business and get the wrong association, but some lady fell off of one of those and hit the back of her head. And as far as I know, it was either very major injury or that lady actually died. And I think there was a similar situation along the West Bay Road, as they say, the 7 Mile Beach corridor.
Right.
And so we've already had these fatalities. And I'm highlighting this because I would love to be able to get our CIP in here to discuss this and really let us know what's going on. But you're not seeing any decrease in these things. They're only increasing.
Right.
And where I can understand people wanting to get to work and you want to maybe see if you can cut across the traffic, I just think it's extremely dangerous.
Yes.
And like I said, it's going to be traumatic. Talk about traumatic. I think it's traumatic for the person who ends up running over someone on these things.
Sure.
Or even having them crashing into their car.
Yes.
And in addition to that, I actually learned something here. There's a, you know what the specific term is, Austin, for driving up the middle of the road?
I do not.
Lean.
The road?
Apparently, yeah, running up the middle of the road.
Crazy?
In the Cayman Islands, lane splitting, the practice of motorcyclists riding between lanes of traffic or along the center line, is not illegal, according to the Traffic Act 2020-21 revision. All vehicles, including motorcycles and scooters, are required to operate within designated lanes. The Traffic Act mandates that vehicles must adhere to lane discipline, and overtaking should be performed safely within the bounds of the law. Specifically, motorcycles are expected to overtake other vehicles by using the appropriate lanes and without crossing into opposing traffic or riding along the center line for extended periods. So again, just raising this issue for discussion if anyone is interested. Yeah. But I think that we have a proliferation of these. They're not getting any less. And I know that there's persons that are actually going out of their way to actually motorize these some of these bicycles. In other words, it's not even that they purchased it that way.
Right.
They've actually, rigged up their own thing, to put it that way. And I just want to raise it as a concern because I see a lot of these on the road, and I think that it would be good to know what is being done. No helmets are required, despite the fact that it's motorized. And I grew up at least in a system where if it was motorized, it definitely had to have a license, and you had to have a license to drive it.
Right.
And I think you were highlighting yesterday that if it was over 125 cc, then again, you had to have another type of license, just like you have group license in relation to your vehicles. So share with us, Austin, what it was that you might have found or not found on the traffic law.
Well, thanks for that. Well, again, my first point of search began at the DVDL website, which, again, for folks who really want to know, it is dvdl.gov.ky. And from there, you get to, see things like, vehicle licensing, vehicle transfer, suspension of vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. When you go down the list of vehicle licensing fees, you have your traditional private motor car, Hummer, rental cars, rental motorcycles, taxis, omnibuses. The closest thing that comes anywhere near what we're talking about is motorcycles, and it's not broken down by, I guess, well, there's one that says not exceeding 50 cc's, those exceeding 50 cc's to 125 cc's, and those exceeding 125 cc's. And then they go on to list the fees to license these vehicles.
Yeah.
But if you look at specifically the traffic law, or now the Traffic Act 2021, starting first with definitions, we have vehicles, we have pedal cycle. Now, pedal cycle means three different things, but for the purposes, I think, of this conversation, it would be pedal cycle definition C, which is a motorized bicycle or cycle propelled by means of pedals, capable of being driven in excess of 15 miles per hour. So I suspect the motorized bicycle that you may have crossed may have been in this category. So that's one. Then there's special purpose vehicle, which means either amphibious ATV or special electric vehicle, which I'm hoping or assuming the stand-up scooter falls into, but the law does not define it specifically. And then, of course, there's special vehicle, which applies to vehicles that are not meant to be driven on the road, and these include things like forklifts, front-end loaders, track laying, or wheeled vehicles. And let's go to, they also have mopeds. A moped being a vehicle having two road wheels and equipped with a power unit or a cylinder capacity of no more than 50 cubic centimeters or less. So again, I don't know what size the engine is on the stand-up scooter, but it may fall in a moped category, for example. But it also goes on to state that Cabinet may make special regulations as they deem fit and as they deem fit for different types of vehicles. So now, I didn't look in the regulations. I had enough time going through the rather monstrous Traffic Act to see if we could find some sort of standard or requirement. Now, when we look at, again, if we're assuming that motorized bicycles and motorized stand-up scooters fall in the category of a special permit for use or a special purpose vehicle, Section 54 states two things. 54.1, before using a special purpose vehicle on the road or in the public, the owner shall apply to the director for a permit by submitting an application. And then 2, where the director is satisfied that the special purpose is equipped with the requirements outlined in Section 55, the director may issue such an application. Now, on the one hand, it may be that whilst the DVDL website does not specifically list, stand-up scooters or motorized bicycles in the list of what you can register, maybe this may be one of those special permits given to certain groups of people by the director. But then I looked at the requirements for special purpose vehicles contained in Section 55(1), and it is quite exhaustive, but includes things like headlights, rear lights, reflectors, traffic indicators, brakes, horns, at least one driving mirror, seat belts, windscreens, wipers, tires. Those things you would think are part of a traditional motor vehicle, but certainly not a special purpose vehicle. So therefore, all of these requirements, save A and B, headlights and rear lights, would not apply to stand-up scooters. And why do I say that? Because yesterday we talked about, and I think one of our callers even referred to them by name. Again, there's the stand-up scooters that are available for rent. So in other words, you scan your debit card or whatever at the point of contact, right, and then that releases the item from the braking lock.
Brakes position.
And then you can take it and, use it. The beauty of this thing is...
Until your coins run out.
Until your coins run out. And then you don't even have to take it back to the dock where you got it from.
Just leave it.
You just leave it wherever it is, and I guess it's found vis-a-vis GPS, and then, the company comes and picks it up. But the ones that say bird on them, and I saw both of these types today specifically, just ironically.
You were focused on it, Austin.
Well, I was thinking about it, and then the universe obviously, worked with me.
That's right.
Because I crossed not one, but the 2 types of scooters.
Everyone listening to us right now will be seeing them everywhere.
Yeah, now they're going to be seeing them everywhere, I'll just throw punch buggies in there for the kids in the back who are, playing the game. But the bird bicycles, the bird scooters, they do have a headlight, or at least the one that I saw that carried the bird, tailgate sticker. But then, as I was exiting Kirk Supermarket, just before coming to work, I saw another stand-up cycle that was very clearly operating on a motorized means because there was no kicking. Right. The gentleman, riding it had a little baggie with some groceries, and he was there, puttering through, crossing the road and then moving on. But this one, whilst it contained a throttle of some kind, and presumably there was a brake, I don't know, but there was only one handle, so unless that's a throttle and a brake, or it's probably just a throttle, but there was no lights at the front, no lights at the back. So to your point, these scooters are in fact driven on the roads, both day and
night.
The night, and the ones without a light could theoretically be an accident waiting to happen. So from what I've seen in the traffic law itself, or the Traffic Act itself, I do not see anything that prescribes regulations specific to the areas of either a motorized bicycle, although motorized bicycle is included in the definitions, but there is no, terms of use or obligations applied to the rider or owner, let alone a license for it, which again, when we use the example of the old bicycle days, when we were 13, 14, 15, and 16, we could not ride our bicycles on a public road without a license,
right?
Which was just a little bit bigger than what would be today the dog licenses get. Just a little bigger, but not much. And it stood, right there under the seat. But cops of the day look for those sort of things.
Yep.
I know firsthand. Okay? Just take my word for it. That's all I'm going to say.
I completely agree with you.
But yeah, I haven't been able to find anything in the Traffic Act itself that suggests, identifying motorized bicycles outside of the definitions again, and specifically stand-up scooters that, define the terms of use.
Yeah, and see, it raises some concerns, right? I mean, let's say someone rents one of these, what do you call it? Stand-up scooters. Well, first of all, you have to bear in mind that just because you have a debit card or a credit card doesn't mean you're over 18. That's the first thing. You could be younger and have access to a debit card or a credit card. So you can't even control technically the age of the person who is going to ride it. That's important because you have to be, at least as far as I know in the Cayman Islands, you have to be age of majority to enter into a contract.
Yeah.
Right? And you're technically entering into a contract when you swipe your card to ride that thing. Now, if that person gets injured, let's just say that they caused injury to themselves. You know, they went too fast and fell off the bike or whatever it is. Who's responsible for that now? Who's responsible legally for that?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Yeah.
Very good question.
And all of these are things, and I just don't know how. I mean, I keep saying I have to be missing something. You know, like I fell asleep for 4 years and I missed something.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't see where all of the regulations, the laws, and all these things that are put together to deal with these issues. I just don't think it's being done.
Yeah.
I mean, I even saw one the other day with the little uni one. The little unicycle is just kind of one wheel, and you're just standing up.
Yes.
And it's all fine and nice and cute, but it's not cute when it...
Segway, I think they call those.
It's not going to be cute when you get in an accident.
Right, right.
And all I'm simply saying is, fine, we need to make sure that somebody has determined what can be done, where it can be done, what protections are required if you're going to use it. Because I think if you can zip by me going 30-something miles an hour, I think a helmet at the minimum.
Just a minimum.
Yeah, I think it should be required.
Yeah.
And to know that it would seem as if there's no specific license requirement, it means that technically a 15-year-old could jump on one of these, swipe a card, don't have to wear a helmet, and doesn't need to have a license to drive a car or even a motorcycle. But yet you're still allowing them to go at least 25, 30-something miles an hour.
On a public road.
On a public road.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
needs to be looked at.
There are 15-year-olds riding these things. I know it for a fact. I have seen young people, riding both day and night, sometimes even in the early mornings, because as you know, we both operate on vampire hours. Sometimes we just can't sleep, and other times we
nocturnal Austin.
We wake up way before the dark 30 hour while the moon is still up and can't go back to sleep. So what are you going to do? But yeah, I've seen these things in operation, and to your point, they're not. And again, we're not casting aspersions on these innovations, because where did they come from? Why did they enter the scene? Well, I suspect, when we looked at the whole issue of traffic, cars make traffic. Too many cars make traffic jams. So whilst persons are certainly needing to commute, we were looking at smaller, more eco-friendly cars, vehicles that don't emit noxious fumes, vehicles that don't run on petrol or dieseline, vehicles that can, be picked up and moved around with you, as opposed to be, taking up any major space on a roadway, or can operate on a medium. All of those things are fantastic. And of course, the introduction of these new world innovations, renewable vehicles or environmentally friendly vehicles, all of that is fantastic. But I think, to your overarching point, it is a question of safety. We have requirements for persons getting behind a motor vehicle because it can not only get you from point A to point B, but it can kill you, and it can kill others. Let's call it what it is. We got a report in the newspaper today of the dancing policeman that is so very popular downtown on cruise ship days, but his son tried to run him over with, I assume, a vehicle. Yeah. Likewise, we see the regular occurrences, we used to hear about it all the time, of bike riders getting knocked down, by vehicles on the side of the road, particularly persons in the hospitality industry getting home late at night. If you're working a bartender or, wait staff or whatever the case may be, you're on the road at 1 or 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And for a while there, they were getting knocked over almost every weekend.
Yeah.
So do we wait, to your point, until one of these scooters or motorized bicycles gets knocked down, injured, or, God forbid, killed, before we start asking ourselves, maybe he should have been wearing a helmet? Maybe a light would have been useful.
Yeah, and see, it even, like I said earlier when I started, it even extends beyond the death. And of course, that I think is the ultimate thing. And it is unfortunate in Cayman, but it seems as if something bad has to happen before somebody does something. Proactive is out. But bear in mind that let's just say again, if somebody is committing theft, let's just say you have a truck driver, that's going into a neighborhood, they're stealing stuff. License plates serve many different purposes.
Sure.
Okay, it doesn't mean the owner was driving, but I'll tell you what, if the police officer sees the license plate, he can say, I know the license plate that was used on the truck that was most likely suspected in this theft.
Yes.
Okay, you can do a little bit more investigation.
Sure.
How do you do that with the scooters?
Yes.
How do you do that with scooters?
You don't.
You know, I'm just swiping a card and I'm going, okay, so you would, just like your data protection, you want to basically be able to say, all right, you have a video camera outside your building, but we need to also have regulation that deals with how you can manage and what you can do with that data. Well, in the same way, does the police have access to these persons to say, well, we need to know who swiped the card that would have used it between the hours of 8 and 9 tonight and might have been in this particular neighborhood? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would hope someone has it, but I'm a little doubtful.
Right.
Because if we can't cover the things on the surface that says you should not be able to go along a highway at 30 miles an hour without wearing a helmet, then I doubt you probably got the rest correct.
Well,
or dealing with the rest.
A writer on WhatsApp presents a simple question that is followed by what they prescribe as a simple solution. Simple question. Do electric cars require licensing and insurance and must be duly inspected for roadworthiness? Then why would electric bikes not be the same?
That's
again,
it.
I think is a fair observation. Again, when we look at Section 55 of the same Traffic Act, which laid out, it says exactly this. A special purpose vehicle shall be equipped with the following original manufactured items, and one goes down to list a whole number of them. Paragraph 2, the provisions of the Vehicle Insurance Third-Party Risks Act 2012 revision relating to minimum coverage to apply to a special purpose vehicle in the same way apply to a vehicle as defined in Section 2 of the Act. So to the writer's question, yes, electric vehicles are required to carry insurance, and therefore if you look at Section 55.2 of the Traffic Act, it is saying that all electric vehicles under the caveat of a special purpose or special vehicle, which again, this law defines their definitions closest fit what we're talking to. Again, it does not spell it out. It doesn't say stand-up scooter. Doesn't say, well, it does say in pedal cycle, bike with a motorized vehicle, so it fits under the pedal cycle bracket. But either way, electric vehicles do require third-party insurance, and therefore special purpose vehicles require the same.
Yeah, well, again, I'm glad you raised the insurance issue because that is an issue, right? What is happening? Again, someone can take their bicycle and motorize it, and is it a case now that they have to go and get the proper insurance with it, along with all the other requirements? Someone writes, if a young Caymanian brings in these and starts business, then we will see regulations.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
True.
Now, either way, it is 5:32 here in the studio, 745-2626. Let us know if you have something on your mind, just discussing this whole issue about our new age vehicles on the road, apparently working on some new age rules. But either way, would love to hear if you have anything to join on the conversation. If not, we move on.
Right. Well, certainly, again, we would welcome your comments and feedback. And, I think, as you pointed out, whether we are talking about road fatalities, as we talked about, in our early weeks of the show, again, we're only a month old, so give us a break. Anything was a recent conversation for us. But, as we talked about recently, as it relates to, vehicles being used to injure persons, likewise, do we wait until somebody gets injured before we, regulate some of these industries?
Absolutely.
We have a caller on the line. Let's go to the phone lines. Good evening, caller. You're on the air.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As a motorist on the road, I am very scared of these electric scooters. For one, you cannot hear them.
Right.
Yes.
They don't make they don't make any sound.
Correct.
And they ride them very recklessly. And if they damage my vehicle, who am I gonna claim for damage?
Yes.
Correct.
And if I hit them because of their own recklessness, then my insurance would be liable for them.
Yep.
And they duly use the roads where I, as a person who is paying the licensing fee for my vehicle, where the licensing fee goes towards maintaining the road, These vehicles, there are so much of them, and they are not contributing anything to the maintenance of our roadways, and they are duly using them. So I do think that something should be done. Memory served me right. I remember there was a time when bicycles were licensed.
Yep, yep. You make some excellent points, caller. Definitely.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us. 745-2626.
Yeah, I mean, again, awesome contribution, because there you go again. It was a matter that morning I'm very soon about to turn right. Mm-hmm. And you can't hear them. It's not even as if it's a big bike or something else that you can say, I'm hearing something. What is that? No, they're very silent. What happens now when that person who's driving hits the individual?
Yeah.
I mean, outside of knowing that you probably hurt someone seriously, or God forbid, kill someone, you're still stuck in a situation where you're paying insurance and your insurance will have to pay.
Yes.
But they don't have insurance. So either way, I would love to be able to get RCIP, hopefully someone from RCIP, and maybe we can try calling the commissioner himself. But it would be good to get someone in here, because we would like to know exactly what is going on, and if nothing is going on, what can go on to deal with this issue proactively. Indeed. I think it should be done. Quicker clock.
Well, and I will also add that I've gone through the Traffic Act today, and I couldn't find anything relating to these specific areas. But sometimes, and again, it does say that Cabinet may offer directions for special circumstances in different categories, and that usually, when they make a statement like different categories and it's very broad, but it is not defined in the substantial law itself, then it may be broken down in the regulations. So one of my duties tonight, when I have some light bedtime reading, will be to review the Traffic Regulations 2021. That is obviously the companion document to the Traffic Act itself, and I'll see if I can find an answer therein. If there is an answer there, obviously I will report back to you and, of course, the wider listening audience, which may negate the opportunity to get the police commissioner in studios. But on the issue of proactive policing, I would certainly like to see us tie, if we can't find it in regulations, to tie this conversation off and say, okay, well, here's the explanation, here are the rules, it is written down somewhere, we stand corrected. Unless we can find it there, then we will ask, a higher power. But certainly when we talk about being proactive on our roadways, we have argued for some time that a number of road fatalities could be avoided with greater police presence. And it doesn't require multiple police cars. It just requires one police car, maybe two. But again, time and time again, every road fatality that's ever occurred on the Cayman roadways, the police arrive after the fact. Yeah. I'm not saying that cops are required to be everywhere all of the time, but they are required to be somewhere some of the time.
Which, by the way, we need to follow up on what happened with the kid. The person goes into their car.
Oh yeah, that whole road rage incident is still not off the book.
Yeah, just so that we don't forget, we need to follow up on that. But the thing is, Austin, honestly, I get to the point where it's like I have to control myself from. I don't want to use the improper language here in the studio.
Yes. No, absolutely.
But it is just some crazy things happening in this country. And I don't want to knock the police. I mean, I've had members of my family that were police, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not disparaging everyone. But I just don't understand how it's like, do you not see, am I the only one seeing people running around in scooters going 30 miles an hour and even going in the complete opposite direction? Okay, so when I'm younger, it tells you plain and straight, if you're walking at night, wear something bright.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get some basics. I mean, okay, if you're riding a bicycle, you go with the traffic. This is for a reason.
Yeah.
I got knocked off my bicycle at 4:30 in the morning, right? Because I'm with the traffic, it means the bike is pushed from under me and I fall back. Okay? That might not always end well, but it's a lot better than if you're facing the traffic, it hits you, and the handlebar tries to go through your body.
Right.
This is common sense.
Right. It is common sense, though I've heard the argument to the opposite, where persons, again, this is going back a few years now, mind you, it may have improved, but persons who were, again, in the food and beverage industry, and either they or their friends, persons had close calls where they felt the breeze of the car brush by them, and that was close enough to, set off a warning. But those same persons, whilst they will acknowledge that the rules of the road say that if you are riding a bicycle, you ride with and in the direction of the flow of traffic. But because bicyclists were in fear for their life on the roadways, some of them rode against oncoming traffic.
Yeah,
So
that I had an incident that happened twice. One was knocked down and one was attempted to be knocked down. And I'm almost confident I know who that person was, but God bless them, right?
Right.
The bottom line of it is if you're riding facing the traffic and the car makes an error, you can talk about correction. You're not making any corrections, okay?
Yeah.
If you make a correction, it's by the grace of God. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
And so you have to ride the correct way, because if you're not, you're going to be seriously injured. And so back to the basics, I can't, it's like, I feel like this country is like going crazy. It's like, there was someone just this morning, I'm on Sparker Drive, he's again riding one of these electrical bicycles and coming against the traffic, right? And a truck is so close to he's between a fence and a truck.
Yes.
And I don't know, it's just really, really crazy. And I want a police officer to call, explain it to me. Why isn't someone saying it can't possibly be right that you're riding 30 miles an hour on a highway and you don't even have a helmet on?
Right.
And do they ever get pulled over and said, can I see if you even have a driver's license? Can I see what your age is?
Yeah.
It's like, are we living on a different planet or something?
Right.
You know? And again, I talked about it yesterday. The other issue is people standing in the dark, wearing dark clothes, and then they're dark. You can't see them until you're 5 feet on top of them. It's just really crazy, and I really don't understand why something is not being done about this.
Yeah.
But either way, I guess we'll have to wait until someone dies or something horrific happens, and then we can all sit and discuss it and do something about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just in terms of, making the roadways accessible and user-friendly, a lot of our roads were built, years and years and years ago. But I remember under my last term in office, and again, only directly related to the work we did on the whole traffic recommendations, was I discovered that, and I may have the nomenclature incorrect, but the minister responsible for planning and infrastructure, who's the one who builds and plans the roads, and then NRA goes out and actually builds them, we're using a concept, I want to remember it called a total road concept, which included, and we saw some of these being implemented in areas, in the area of, say, Dixie Cemetery, Kirk Supermarket, and heading into town, where you have lanes, and this is a single carriageway road we're talking about now, but there are examples for it being wider. We see some of it on 7 Mile Beach once you pass the governor's residence, for example. But you have the lanes for the vehicle, but then you have adequate but clearly demarcated cycling lanes for bicycles, riders, motorcycles, and whatnot. But that can be used for walkers in the absence of sidewalks, which, of course, are also being part of the new road construction, so that wherever possible, there will be sidewalks included in there. But with the thinking that it's more than just motorists who use the roadways. Yeah, again, common sense would say so, but sometimes innovation takes a little while to catch up to common sense. But new roads being constructed will take on this whole concept-driven approach that they will be wider. They will be, thinking of pedestrians as well as motor vehicles. But to your point, whilst there are provisions for more users of that road, what are we doing on the safety standpoint to protect those users whilst they use a public road?
Yeah, well, just after I got knocked down, I can tell you, I just stopped riding my bike. Even my daughter, I said, sorry, I won't be giving you my bike. There's no way I'm going to give you my bike.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Things are just crazy. On the standpoint of walking, I would love to see more trees, because if we could have a couple more trees, honestly, I would love to do more walking.
Sure.
I just can't possibly walk, because by the time you get where you're going, you'll be drenched in sweat.
Yeah.
But if they could learn to plant a tree, that would be nice.
Again, this is all part of that whole development plan conversation as to what it should look like, because without a doubt, public open spaces are few and far between these days. All one has to do is take a drive. I challenge you to drive anywhere west of Dixie Cemetery all the way up to Public Beach, and you take the coastal road, not the highway that runs in the middle of the road, albeit the highway that runs in the middle of the road, you see more greenery that way than you do on the coastal road. But we have concreted and steeled almost all and every aspect of the coastline. So not even a coconut tree survives, let alone a whisper of wind. And again, some of us will argue that, well, this is what we wanted because we seem to have a South Beach mentality. We want Cayman to look more and more like the U.S., where other Caribbean islands are going in the opposite direction. Obviously, trying to keep that island feel and island vibe because, you're catering to the tourists who are otherwise paying for this service. But they come here, and we are very metropolitan. And I guess maybe that's the difference between being first world or considered first world versus being considered third world. But I agree with you. Public open spaces, greenery, plants,
and
fresh
see, the thing
air.
is, I don't think that you have to necessarily have one without the other, because even if you have the development, I mean, you can still plant a lot of trees. I mean, just around one of my places, like it's 15 trees, if not 20, all around the perimeter. I think we can plant a lot of trees. I mean, why don't we even have some down the middle of the road somewhere? But either way, I think if we can have some more trees, you could probably get people doing a lot more walking. I sure would like to do it. Walking, I think, is pretty healthy for you. You just need to make it that it's something feasible. I can walk to work without being drenched in sweat. Either way, I just think as a country, it just seems like some of these things, honestly, I even had a discussion, I'm digressing, but I had a discussion, I think it was either Saturday or Sunday, and I'm chatting with a friend of mine, and, of course, knowing me, I had to mention the referendum. They said, I'm voting for gambling and marijuana. And I'm just saying, so what about the cruise? I don't know about that one. And I'm thinking to myself, are we like losing it as a country? Like when have we got to a point where, marijuana is perfectly fine? Like how is marijuana and gambling supposed they're going to help you? I mean, I just spell it straight. I grew up seeing people smoking marijuana all the time. And as far as I know, they're either dead or still smoking marijuana, Like, is this a productive society? Like, are we all just looking forward to walking around one day and just seeing everyone smoking a spliff? This is the future? I don't know. I mean, this is, I think we're kind of losing our minds.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because a lot of people misunderstand what the decriminalization of marijuana or cancer.
I know where it's going to carry us.
It certainly will. It could very well carry us down that lane, but certainly it does not mean under decriminalization that now persons can light up a ganja spliff on the side of the road as easy as they light up a cigarette. That's not what decriminalizing means.
I assure you, that is not what the interpretation is.
Yeah.
The majority of people that you hear saying, I'm going to vote yes on the referendum for marijuana, is not saying, oh, well, we're doing it so that some little kid can go to Miami to the hospital in the event that, he did smoke it in the past. Or we're simply doing it so that, you don't get long. That's not what they're doing. I think people can infer where it all goes. It's a nice cascade, and I think that's the reality of the situation. But either way, it is an interesting world that we are living in today, right?
Yeah.
And I know it has become the fad. The whole issue about smoking pot now has become, that's the new thing. You have to smoke pot. We're cool.
Right.
And I've seen this on the, the so-called professional chats, persons that I would have said, well, I thought they were pretty much intellectuals, and they're just bring it on.
Yeah. Well, there is the other side of it.
I guess it's the wisdom weed, I suppose.
There is the other side. I mean, there are a number, and I think somebody provided the statistics, maybe even the prison service provided the statistics of the number of persons who are incarcerated or who have a criminal record. And a lot of it is simple possession of a banned substance, which marijuana is still a banned substance and is still considered a Schedule 1 drug. But there are persons who are, as we say in this country, rubbing time for a single spliff, rubbing time or have a criminal record for that single spliff, whether it was 20 years ago or just last week. And not only do they have a criminal record, but they are also, restricted in terms of their travel. They're restricted in terms of their employment opportunities, because nobody wants to hire someone with a criminal conviction, let alone a criminal conviction that is a drug conviction. And again, it's difficult to have the conversation because you don't want to marginalize any drug, but certainly the whole decriminalizing aspect and the reasons that are supportive behind it aren't just happening in a vacuum. They're not just happening in this country. They're happening worldwide, and they're all being, sort of taking a similar track, albeit some places are going even further to full-blown legalization, which, again, is not being prescribed right now. But to your point, it starts with the first step. So, maybe you get decriminalization, this week, and maybe next year or 2 years or 3 years you get legalization. But there is an aspect that is hard to ignore. Persons who have been tainted with, criminal records or criminality for what some would otherwise describe as, a finable or misdemeanor offense. Should we ruin their lives for what is considered the world over as a misdemeanor? I think there's suitable argument to be made in that regard.
Well, again, in most circumstances, if you look at the rehabilitation law to a great extent, you're not going to be destroying someone's lives forever. Again, we had a case a couple of days ago where we talked about dishonesty, and that's relevant simply because it's an election issue. But in most cases, a lot of these things are expunged from your record after a period of time, and I think the majority of them happen to face that magical five-year time. And I understand, I can be empathetic, but I can also tell you that, you kind of have rules, and you have rules that say, you don't drink, or you don't smoke, or you don't do X, Y, and Z. And it's pretty straightforward. You don't want to get in trouble, well, don't do it. And I think that when you make it easier for somebody to do it, I think that's exactly where you're going to go. And I could have told you 20 years ago that the moment the United States or some of the states starts to legalize marijuana, it would become legal, and Jamaica wouldn't even be an issue anymore because America would be growing it and exporting it.
Yeah.
I think blind Bartimeus could see that one probably.
Well, 745-2626 is the number, or you can send us a WhatsApp message at 928-2562. You can either send us that message in the form of a voice note or in the traditional WhatsApp text message. Since you brought it up, and I just happened to be scanning the headlines, I see, as we talked about yesterday, of course, reminding audiences of the ACT or ACT Cruise Tourism Public Awareness meeting scheduled for the 25th of this month.
Yeah,
is that
25th.
Right? But I see on the pages of your least favorite CNS, that the regional economist to challenge cruise wisdom at Raleigh, one of Cayman's favorite regional economists, Marla Dukaran, will be challenging the received wisdom about cruise tourism at a rally next week. And she has challenged the concept that cruise tourism is positive for the economy. So CPR will have, again, an opportunity to host Ms. Dukaran, who is a respected figure, a respected economist, someone that I certainly have read many of her individual reports and thought, wow, they're spot on. But she's going to obviously take a stake that cruise tourism isn't viable in this country, and I'm sure she's going to pull some numbers to back this up. So what do you think?
Well, I could say a lot of things about what I think. I think, what they say about consultants and lawyers, I don't think is much different with this situation here. But let me just say this. I have read some of the things that she said. On one hand, I think it talked about suggesting that cruise tourism really wasn't that great. And on the other hand, I heard one of the arguments where she was talking about cruise tourism possibly being able to be used to fund the beach replenishment. So it varies, Austin.
6 of one, half dozen the next, right?
It varies, Austin. But I can tell you, again, here's the reality of the situation. And I don't really want to go down the trees too much again on cruise tourism.
Okay.
But there are a lot of persons who are nice, who are saying we should get rid of cruise tourism, and they want to do so in part because they don't want to have to deal with the traffic as they get to their loyalty towers. And many of them are into finance, and they just see it as an obstacle, And if you want to tell us that it should be somewhere else, you can. But I think at the end of the day, it plays an important part in the economy, and it should be utilized.
Yeah, indeed.
Ms. Dukaran or anybody else that you can pay to come here to say something different, well, you can pay them to play them or play them to pay them. I don't know. Fine.
Yeah. 745-2626. Time in studio is now 5:54, giving us just over 4 minutes before we have to pause and take a break. So over the weekend, it is the election season, and over the weekend we had a number of groups.
Someone wrote me and said, isn't that the Economist, the same lady that was saying she wasn't getting into local politics? Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Again, he who pays the piper calls the
Well,
tune.
that's exactly what I'm suggesting, you know.
Yeah, indeed.
It can bring Bill Clinton here, too.
He could.
Just pay him.
You could. As I was saying, over the weekend, we had the launch parties for at least two political groups, the PPM and the Caymanian Community Party. And of course, you know, we can take or refuse either way. We can make comments about certainly what was said or otherwise. But and I don't mean this as a personal attack, but it was an observation that certainly jumped out the page for me, particularly against the backdrop of, you know, all of the publicity one group is getting maybe over another group. And again, we can, you know, premise as to why that is. But the Caymanian Community Party, and with the greatest of respect to Andre Eubanks, because Andre Eubanks is a friend. For 4 years, he was a constituent. He still lives in Prospect, so I represented him. And in addition to that, he was, when he wasn't the representative to the UK, of the Cayman Islands to the UK, he was Deputy Chief Officer in the Ministry of Community Affairs, which I had direct responsibility for. So I worked with him on a day-to-day basis. So I have respect for him. I like him as a person, and that's what it is. This is not a personal attack, but it is an observation. So he's being quoted in the media as saying TCCP blame, you know, special interests. And during his speech and video presentation, he raised questions such as uncontrolled spending, blaming the PPM, education, blaming the PPM, and, you know, unchecked development, blaming the PPM. But here's the observation that I made of him and the four AKA quitters, as they have been coined. They left the cabinet benches in November last year. We are now March of 2025. That's 4 months ago. So any criticism that the TCCP, in this instance, is putting on either the current administration or the previous administration, certainly the current administration consisted of them up until 4 months ago.
Well, I'm really going to have to hear that again. You're going to have to read that again when we come back from the break, because I definitely think I want to discuss that. But and I can see that they're not going to stop until they push us, right? They're going to push us, Austin.
They are going to push us.
But, you know, let me comment really again on this whole issue about Dukeran being brought down. What that does raise in my mind is just a few weeks ago, I remember that CNS were writing articles to try to suggest that, you know, the ACT was the Goliath in the room and the underdogs were the poor CPR group. So I wonder where they're getting all that money to bring Dukeran down to make a speech. Or is that a freebie?
Again, when they talk about transparency in terms of spending, transparency.
It would be good for them to talk about where they're getting their money from.
Well, I think it would be good if one side is going to say, well, you know, ACT consists of all the otherwise shop owners and persons directly involved with cruise tourism. Well, yeah, that makes sense. They are fighting for their livelihoods. But likewise, where is the transparency on the other side? I think that's a fair comment to make.
Yeah.
I just sent you the link, which you probably won't have time to review entirely, but you'll have at least 7 minutes to get, you know, what I did was, you know, certainly the gist of the remarks in the opening minutes. So maybe during the break you can have a listen on it. And this, of course, relates to what I was just talking about in terms of the criticisms or the throwing the rocks.
Well, the interesting thing is that CCP would be made up of both, right? Because you had 3 of those persons that were definitely involved with the UPM.
4.
And one of them was in the PPM.
Yeah, quite right.
All 4 was involved with the UPM. Correct.
Correct.
And at least one of them was also part of the PPM at one point.
Indeed. Well, we have to pause, take a short commercial break, but keep it locked. There'll be more Straight Talk still to come right here on 103.1 FM.
How can we understand the world better?
The BBC World Service is a window onto the wider world.
The vantage point from which to survey a new horizon.
News, reports, and analysis from around the world.
Stories we think matter.
Different people from different societies.
We get to the heart of global issues.
News, stories, and global perspectives from the BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
The BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
The BBC World Service makes programs with a uniquely global perspective.
Enlighten us. Where do we start?
The latest world news and current affairs.
The very best in global arts and culture.
What has been happening on the financial markets today.
Social issues, political stories.
Everything was there in a way that I never heard before.
The BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
Welcome to our newsroom here in central London. We place ourselves here at a little desk right in the thick of things.
OS from the BBC.
We can catch the very latest news from our colleagues, not just in this enormous room, but also from our colleagues around the world.
I'm in the room where they're treating children.
This is a combat zone.
The situation after the typhoon is very complicated.
It was a very tense situation.
OS from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
For business, they say location, location, location. But really, there's no better location than right here, right now on your mobile phone or laptop. Buy and sell your pre-owned gear where the island is searching online. Buy and sell on ektrade.com. That's ektrade.com.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. Powered by Health Services Authority. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Ukraine says an American proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire in the war with Russia includes a truce in the air, at sea and along the entire front line as US officials prepare to present the deal to Moscow. After 8 hours of talks in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine backed the proposal, with President Zelensky describing it as a positive step. James Waterhouse is in Kyiv.
For Ukraine, there is a political sigh of relief. This statement means that America's and Ukraine's relationship is seemingly patched up. For Ukraine, it was all about restoring a constructive dialogue. It was about having American aid and intelligence sharing restored, and that seems to be the case. This proposed ceasefire would, in the words of Marco Rubio, be along the entire front line. It would freeze the contact line before further negotiations can take place.
Meanwhile, the United States has lifted its suspension of military and intelligence support for Ukraine after those talks in Jeddah. It was paused last week following a dramatic showdown between Donald Trump and President Zelensky at the White House. The two sides say they will now work to finalise the agreement as soon as possible. US stock markets have had a second turbulent day after Donald Trump announced he was doubling the tariffs for imports of Canadian steel and aluminium before reversing his decision a few hours later. Mr. Trump changed course after the Canadian province of Ontario agreed to roll back its threat to significantly increase the cost of electricity it supplies to American homes. Here's our North America business correspondent, Erin Delmore.
It's a remarkable turnaround after President Trump earlier threatened to increase tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum by an additional 25%, bringing the total import tax to 50%. President Trump has now walked that back, but he reiterated his desire to absorb Canada into the U.S. as its 51st state. And a scheduled 25% tariff on steel and aluminum is still going into effect tomorrow. Canada is America's biggest supplier of both.
A plane carrying the former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has left Manila for the International Criminal Court in The Hague, where he'll face trial. Prosecutors allege that during his presidency, Mr. Duterte had thousands of drug dealers, users and others killed without trial. John Sifton from Human Rights Watch welcomed Manila's decision to hand Mr. Duterte over to the ICC.
If you had told many Filipinos, if you had told us at Human Rights Watch that one day President Duterte would be on an airplane flying to The Hague, we would have been very surprised, given the level of impunity that he enjoyed. But it's a historic day, and I think Filipino victims and survivors and surviving family members of victims should have a lot to celebrate today.
BBC News. Security forces in Pakistan have rescued more than 100 people who were taken hostage in an attack on a passenger train. Insurgents are locked in a battle with troops in a mountainous area of Balochistan province. It's unclear how many hostages are still being held. The Jaffa Express was carrying more than 400 people when it was attacked. The Portuguese government has collapsed, having lost a confidence vote in Parliament. The motion was tabled by the minority coalition government itself. The Prime Minister, Luis Montenegro, is embroiled in controversy over a potential conflict of interest. It means the country now faces a third election in barely 3 years. An appeals court in France has ruled the French state must compensate people in 2 Caribbean territories who can demonstrate they've been affected by anxiety over exposure to a dangerous pesticide. The Court of Appeal highlighted state failures to protect people in Martinique and Guadeloupe from chlordacone. Used in banana plantations until it was banned 30 years ago, the pesticide has been linked to cases of prostate cancer, infertility and child mental health issues. West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS, is set to activate a standby force to tackle terrorism and transnational crimes. Defence chiefs meeting in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, say the force will be jointly funded by member states. Chris Owoko reports.
This would be the first standby force by the regional bloc to fight insurgency and terror threats. ECOWAS is grappling with a mixture of political instability and security challenges, including jihadist insurgency, cross-border crimes and piracy. The force will be in the mood of the former military arm of the bloc, known as ECOMOG, which was formed in 1990 to regularly intervene in conflicts within the region. With the 3 Sahel nations now outside the bloc, ECOWAS must confront the fight against terror without their collective military support.
BBC News.
Views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Straight Talk with your host, Austin Harris, and myself, Ellio Solomon, here on your radio dial, 103.1. And of course, the time here in the studio is 6:06. Number to call if you want to get into the conversation, 745-2626. That's 745-2626. And I do want to say that just before the break, my colleague was bringing up this issue of comments that would have been being made by CCP.
Yes.
CCP. And, you know, obviously they're pushing us to be able to say something. But let me just say, first of all, I understand, and I'm going to summarize it, Austin. The comments were coming from CCP is, you know, again, criticisms on the UPM government and the PPM government in terms of, you know, spending money. But you feel free to just summarize it before I make a comment on it.
Yeah.
You heard it firsthand.
Well, I heard it firsthand. They had a meeting, and it was streamed live over Facebook. And again, I don't, want to be too harsh, but how do I get rid of this? Sorry, I'm trying to close out one screen and go back to where we were so that I can have the conversation clearly. Yeah, so they held a meeting. It was streamed on Facebook. And, of course, the leader, Mr. Andre Ebanks, was speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And he was being critical of the previous administration for a number of things. Things such as uncontrolled spending, presumably referring to the Auditor General's most recent last report before she left the island, which suggested and warned of the overspend. He was criticizing, the lack of positive milestones in education, clearly suggesting that we haven't learned anything from the, Clifton Hunter days where school infrastructure and buildings do not necessarily an education system make, and things like unchecked development. Well, whilst it's all fair and good, this is political season, and certainly, it's all fair in love and war, as they say. But the only observation that I couldn't help but think to myself, this is a group that, is running on the logo, enough is enough.
Right.
And that's all well and good. But how do you criticize the previous administration, which up until 4 months ago, you were a part of?
Mm-hmm.
So, uncontrolled spending, packed UPM government. They were part of the pact. Education overspend, they're obviously referring to the new Cameron-Brack High School and the, expenditure being allotted to that. On both points, they sat, and again, the CCP, or Enough is Enough, to your point, they consist of more than just persons that were part of the former administration, but their leadership and two cabinet ministers, Sabrina Turner and Catherine Ebanks-Wilkes, and then, of course, MP Heather Bodden, consisted of, the core group that left the PACT government and, branched off into what we call the TCCP today. They're then later joined by the former premier, Wayne Panton. But whether it be uncontrolled spending or the spending that's occurring on the Cameron Brack High School, all four or five of these individuals at one time were members of the government who presided over not one, but two budgetary sessions. So therefore, they approved the money that is being spent in these areas that they were, as of the weekend, criticizing as examples of how not to do it. And again, with respect to those particular groups, how do you throw shade on issues that you, up until 4 months ago, had a hand in? So you're criticizing yourself, or are you trying to convince the voter that you really weren't there?
Yeah.
You had no responsibility.
And that's why you get the musical chairs. You know, it happens every time. Talk about enough is enough. That's enough. Enough of the musical chairs, because just 4 months, if you like, before election, you cross the aisle, and now you're a new group.
Yeah.
You're completely clean. You've crossed the River Jordan, and you're now washed.
Yes.
Right? Because, to your point, they were part of PACT, and they were also part of UPM.
Yes.
So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you're looking in the mirror when you're criticizing.
Yeah.
Either way, I think people can take that for what it is. It is that political rhetoric that goes on. Again, you were just part of the government. You were part of both governments.
Yeah.
So bear in mind that they've had 3 alphabet soups now, by the way.
Yes, they have.
Some of them only might have just been one term, but they've already gone from PACT or PACT to UPM and now to CCP. How long does Cayman talk about enough is enough?
Yeah.
How many different alphabet soups are we gonna have to go through? Yeah. And you can change the name as many times as you want. It doesn't necessarily change the players. And bottom line is, you can't make a criticism that does not stand up to the sniff test. Right? The smell test, you fail.
Yes.
Because you were a part of the PACT that would have been approving budgets, and you were also a part of UPM.
Mm-hmm.
So to now sit back and look at yourself in the mirror and say, by the way, some bad spending, yeah. Well, look in the mirror, because you were a part of it.
Yes.
Austin, on this issue about back on this Duke around, you know how it goes.
That you were going to leave it alone.
Yeah,
you're reinvigorated.
So I'm seeing
I
this.
thought you might like it.
I'm seeing this Loop News, right?
Yeah.
Brian says Caribbean economists unfairly assess tourism sector. Brian suggested that Duke Rand's statement also appeared to get into our local politics, which Brian said highly inappropriate. Tell me about it, Mr. Brian. Anyway, there's a quote here: economists don't do things for free. This is a lot of work. A report like this is a 10-page report with conclusions. Normally, a country could spend potentially pay $100,000, $50,000 for this. So I find it very hard to believe that she did it for free. And then if you read the whole report, you can see the tones in it, but the truth will come out eventually. So I take all of that to just simply jump back at my favorite news. One of my favorite, actually. Let me change that. One of my favorite news media houses, the FEMA CNS, that has a world slant, amazing group. They were the ones just a few weeks suggesting that one group was Goliath and that the poor CPR, the poor suffering ones, the one that had no money, and the other ones is corrupt. We want to know now. Please tell us, publish it, and tell us exactly where the money is coming from to pay Duke around, or if this is going to be a gift. Mm-hmm. In quotations, is this a gift that she's giving to the CPR, out of goodness for the country, or is this something that you're paying for? And if you're paying for it, can we get some exchange of receipts and invoices, and can we get an understanding exactly where that money came from?
Right.
Because did you see CPR on the side of the road, by the way, raising funds, helmets in hand or something? I didn't see it.
No, I didn't.
So I'm looking forward to hearing from that.
Yeah, well, they did. CNS did write an article on it. And again, what I originally quoted came from CNS. It's got a nice, lovely picture of Miss Dukaran, with the headline, "Regional Economist to Challenge Crew's Wisdom at Raleigh." So there is a lengthy article published on it by CNS. But to your point, There's no indication, acknowledgement, or otherwise that her appearance is a paid-for slot or out of the goodness of her heart.
That's again, missing in action. That part.
Well, there's no statement. There's no saying one way or the other in that regard.
I am familiar with some of these quote unquote environmentalist groups, and the newscaster, if you like, of the CNS is right there at the planning everywhere with this same group of people. And quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, clearly I have a political agenda. And what bothers me is when you can't pronounce it. But anyone that reads the paper, please be critical. Be critical and make sure you know at the end of the day who it is that they're supporting.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, like I said, in the spirit of transparency, I think there were calls. There was a statement being made by CPR/vote no. I think when something was published with myself, Mr. Hugh and Mr. Brian talked about corruption and money, etc. So now is a good time to put your money where your mouth is and let us know exactly what is happening with respect to Duperan. And again, like I said, I'm not surprised about her or anybody else coming here and being paid and saying something negative. But I do support the argument that seems like she's really getting involved with politics, and that's unfortunate considering that she once said that she didn't want to do that.
Right. Well, certainly I and a number of people who are either on the fence or perhaps, are spectators in this ongoing debate, but certainly learning information from both sides. It would be nice to see, CPR and ACT on the same platform.
They don't want
exchanging, differing viewpoints for the benefit of the listening audience. And any organizers, the same way that voters are suggesting that any politician that doesn't show up to the slated debates, mind you, whilst we talk about the slated debates, talk about the Chamber Candidates Forum, there are some, and whilst I'm not running in Prospect, I'm still connected to what the voters are asking for in Prospect and Red Bay, and they're asking for that same thing. They want a debate between all of the representatives in Prospect to be held in Prospect for Prospect residents, specifically outside of the Chamber debates. But I doubt that's going to happen in the short window. So Prospect residents, just like Red Bay residents, like any other constituency, will have to depend on the Chamber debates, because I don't think you'll see a forum that'll provide that demand anywhere else. Certainly not on the radio aids. But I would like to see that same debate take place on this very important topic.
Yeah. And a lot of times, Austin, when we have these discussions, because I know I can hear the hamster running in somebody's head. But a lot of times when we have this discussion, I try my best to not get into a lot of the name calling, because it's not about the person.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about a specific entity. It's a matter that I'm trying to show you, open your eyes in certain instances as to what is happening, what happens. So, for example, when I talked about the Chamber debate, I don't have to call the name of the individual or individuals that do not show up to a Chamber debate, but yet you still vote for them.
Right.
Okay? I'm not calling the name, because the name of the person is really not important. What is important is, why are you voting for this person?
Yes. Yes.
On what grounds are you voting for this person? They gave you something?
Yes.
Because it clearly wasn't because they were able to come on a debate and articulate their message.
Correct.
And it's the same thing if I make the argument about ACT. I don't care if it's ACT or if it's CPR, but what I am telling you is that CPR refuses to have a public debate. That in itself should completely discredit them. If you have a valuable or a viable argument, then valuable works too. If you have a viable argument, then come and discuss it.
Right.
Have the debate. Show the public your facts.
Yeah.
And as you said, I got it from you, and stop throwing rocks from behind the bushes.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. But anyway, going to viewpoints from our listening audience, we got one WhatsApp that says, "Good evening, gentlemen. My question is, what can be done to have the banks or lending institutions stop using interest rates from Wall Street? These rates are in the region of 8.25%. Well, I thank, first of all, the listener for that response, but I think they're incorrect in their assumptions. First of all, the prime rate is just a benchmark that banks use to help them set rates. Banks tend to shy away from, affixing long-term fixed rates in the Cayman Islands, probably due to the size of the market, and there's just simply too much risk. But there are no central banks in the Cayman Islands. Retail banks are the ones who set the Cayman Islands or CI prime rate. They get together collectively from the Bankers Association or otherwise, and they determine the way forward themselves based on this market. The CI prime rate usually fluctuates in accordance to the U.S. Federal Reserve rate, which is also known as the New York prime rate. There is no regulatory oversight. Neither SEMA nor any other regulatory body in the Cayman Islands prescribes a minimum or a maximum interest rate to charge in the banks, which I think should give you reason for pause. Again, banks are the world over, aren't an entity unto themselves. They are regulated like everybody else is, but in the Cayman Islands, maybe not so much. Whilst the CI prime rate is the benchmark, and again, we may be using Wall Street to set that benchmark, banks in Cayman also consider other factors that are exclusive to this market, such as the borrower's creditworthiness, the purpose and type of the loan, the market conditions, and whatnot, all exclusive to Cayman. But to answer the writer's specific statement that bank rates in Cayman are not a mirror image of what the Federal Reserve or anyone in the U.S. or any country actually prescribe to their citizens. It is determined internally by the banks themselves after having a little powwow, saying, how much money we can make this year, boys.
Well, even if you see by the interest rates, you'll see if the U.S. raises the interest rates, well, right away, the rates, they raise it here. But even as it gets lowered, I think there's about a 2 or 3 month delay before the lowering takes place.
Yes.
Just that in itself, I think, speaks volumes.
It certainly does. It certainly does. Yeah, and you're right. That's a fantastic example. Whether inflation goes up or the prime rate goes up, banks automatically increase,
of course, that's to their advantage. Yeah.
But they do not mimic the same when those rates go down. Right. And we could say the same thing about gas prices. When there is just the news that there's a war somewhere in the Middle East, gas prices go up. Just on the news, just the rumor.
Right.
And rumors of war. Bob Marley come back again, man. Prophet. He was not a singer, he was a prophet. Man before his time. But just the rumor of war causes gas prices to go up. But when the transverse happens, the trickle down takes a lot longer to get down to us. And a lot of that is determined by the industry providers here in Cayman. Maybe there should be better regulation. I know persons have called for there to be stronger, independent regulation of banks in the Cayman Islands, particularly against the backdrop. We've even heard this from, the floor of Parliament. When we talk about the fees the bank charges, the fees they charge you for taking money out of your own account, fees they charge you for using your ATM, the fees they charge you or restrict you from, using over-the-counter transactions. You can't cash a check that you're not a customer of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And politicians have raised, they're upset, for lack of a better word, about these practices. But again,
you mean they speak to it?
Thank you.
Let me talk to it.
Thank you. Then there is a difference between speaking to it and actually doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out. There is a significant
because
difference.
I'll tell you what banks are doing here, and I mean this is a topic all on its own, but they do everything to ensure that they mitigate their risk. So they want zero risk.
Yes.
But want to charge you a high risk.
Yes.
Interest rate.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
And I mean, like I said, I touched on this before. Yeah, I'm saddened for young persons today. I mean, because now you can't even go out anymore and get a mortgage and say, I'm going to build my house or I'm going to get a, everything is just getting more and more difficult for people to do something. You got to get the construction company, and of course, the construction company has to have an independent manager, right? And I mean, all the hoops that you have to be, passing through.
Yeah.
Talking about hoops.
That's right. Speaking of hoops, yeah.
Dire professional.
But to your point, those requirements add costs to the end service. So therefore, construction prices for homes aren't going to go down anytime soon because of some of these other regulatory requirements that go with it.
And this is, again, where you have politicians that they have the power. Stop listening to them talking about it. They have the power at the end of the day to sit together and say, listen, we need to do something to make it easier to own a home.
Yeah.
Somebody can brainstorm and say, hey, I have an idea. Here's how we can save it. Why does the bank also have to have you have a life insurance? Your dog's got to have a life insurance and your wife. Why is that required? Why is the equity in the home not good enough?
Right.
You know, if something goes wrong, why is the equity in the home not good enough? Why does this person have to also be burdened with life insurance? You know how you fix it? You just put it in the law.
Yeah.
Quick o'clock.
Yeah.
And the same persons who are now making criticisms about when PPM UPM, and PACT, they can rush through financial legislation very quickly if it's to satisfy the European Union,
right.
OECD.
Right.
And that doesn't even have to go the full 28 days.
True.
No, this is important.
True.
But try to bring a plate of food for the Caymanians.
True.
You know, try to give them a referendum so they can decide whether they want to gamble, smoke, or have a cruise.
True.
Oh no, this is not past the smell test. This hasn't gone 28 days. Complete nonsense. They need to be flogged.
Flogged.
Yeah, I mean,
on Friday at noontime in front of the library.
Yeah, we should have public flogging, and I think we should discuss that too, because
we should bring it back.
I think one way to avoid all of these long-term prison, trust me, if you introduce public flogging, a lot of crime would stop quick o'clock. I can assure you.
No argument from me, man. No argument from me at all.
Crime would reduce quick o'clock.
6:26, giving us just over 2 minutes before we have to wrap it up for today. But some good conversations, and I thank the writer for taking us down this path. Certainly, it is useful to know. But again,
yeah, let us know what's itching you.
Let us know what you're thinking. In some cases, in this instance, we can provide you with the answer based on our vast worldly knowledge. I say tongue in cheek.
I don't know why you say that.
I don't know why I say that. I just do.
Remind me.
Some things we know.
That I don't get you to write me a reference. That's all I'm saying.
I write great references.
If you write a reference like that and then put a big smiley face at the bottom, I don't know. It's not gonna work.
Come on, give me some credit.
Put a straight line. Put a straight line.
I'll put the smiley face in my signature. I'll just kind of hide it in there.
I see.
You won't notice it right away. It'll be
after close observation.
It'll be muted and very casual.
Yeah, I hear you.
745-2626 is the number. You got a minute and 50 seconds to call, which I doubt very seriously anyone's gonna take us up on that.
Gonna attempt it. Yeah.
But certainly we do welcome it nonetheless. Thanks to the writers to the show. Thanks to the one caller who called in this afternoon. We do appreciate it.
And a couple of texts.
Again, just reminding you that we are broadcasting live Monday through Friday, 4:30 to 6:30 in your drive time here on Straight Talk. And in addition to hosting guests, as we occasionally do, we don't host guests every single day because, they got to fit either a plan or certainly the current mood and the things that are interests to the listening audience. So you got some shows that will just, roll out one guest right after the next. But, there is a purpose to what we try to achieve here.
There's a sense to the madness.
There is a sense to the madness. 56 seconds left. Some closing comments, my friend?
I just want to say it's a pleasure, as usual, sitting and chatting with you, Austin. Of course, good to know persons are out there listening. Want to encourage them to, call in, send us some text if there's any particular thing you want to discuss. But, of course, as we get into this political season and we have persons making some political incorrect statements, I'm pretty sure that we will be offering up some corrections.
Absolutely. Again, we're doing our very best to stay.
We're trying our best to be
unbiased and not to, make any sort of statements for one side or the other. But we are who we are.
You're tempting us when you make some stupid
when you make a statement like the one that was made this weekend, you're gonna get a response or at least an opinion. But I'm your host, Austin Harris,
and I'm Ellio Solomon. See you tomorrow right here on 103.1